Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Davis, and welcome to this Fresh Business Thinking webinar. It's the second in our Business COVID-19 series. Obviously, there's so much uncertainty for small businesses right now, and while some have been forced to close, others are remaining operational, but their owners aren't really sure how to move forward into the future. So our speaker today is Will King, founder of King of Shaves. Now, Will started his business in 1992 at the height of the recession, and has come through a few more economic downturns since then. Will is going to be discussing the importance of quickly identifying and acknowledging the problems that your business faces and adapting to overcome them. Just a quick bit of information. We'll be talking for about 45 minutes and time for a Q&A at the end. If you have got any questions, just leave them in the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen, and then we'll do our best to put them to Will at the end. But I don't want to step on Will's toes in terms of the topic, so that's all from me now. I will pass you over to Will.
Thank you, Jonathan. So welcome everybody in these most surreal of times, I have to say. I live in central London, and it's super quiet here. You can hear the birds in the morning and quite a lot of ambulance sirens going around. So it's obviously it's a time that none of us will have experienced, and none of us, to be honest with you, have any answers as to what we should all be doing right now to keep alive and to keep business coming in, to keep food on the table, to keep motivated, keep happy. Summer is coming, the storm will pass, but right now it probably means for many of you that it's not so easy to see that. So I've known the guys at Great British Entrepreneur Awards for 5 or 6 years now. I've been a judge last couple of years, and I've given out some awards and given some talks. And I think, you know, I was 27 when I was made redundant back in the early 90s, and I'm 54 now. So I've kind of seen a bit. I try to keep current in terms of what's going on in the world via data inputs, obviously the whole news feeds and seeing what people are up to. I'm a member of quite a few private WhatsApp groups and private chat groups. And there's a huge amount of you know, really tough times for people out there who have obviously never seen anything like this before, especially if you've founded your business in the last 10, 11 years since the big financial crash in 2007 and 8. So I've got quite a lot of notes made. I've got quite a lot of things that I can run through. It may help you if you have a pencil or a pen and a bit of paper there, so you can jot some notes. I'm quite happy for people to get in touch. I do run a little consultancy called Entrepreneur in Residence, and I'm sure Fran can get you the details of that, or I can just let you know what the email address is at the end, just in case any of you are looking for a little bit more help and insight. So hopefully you can all hear me. And I'll dive straight in. So the first thing I wanted to make the point of is that this storm is going to pass. I'm a sailing guy, okay? That's my love, that's my passion. I'm half decent at it. Typically a single-handed sailor, so that's in a laser, which is a single-handed dinghy. But I've sailed across the Atlantic, been through quite a few storms there, been in some quite hairy situations on yachts, and the things with storms is they do pass. So right now there's an economic global hiatus, which is not just affecting you, it's affecting everybody. So don't think that you're alone. Everybody's in the same boat as you are. So just keep that in mind, that it's almost now what you do whilst the storm's raging that will set you well for when the storm's passed, because it will pass, whether it's in a matter of weeks, as Donald Trump seems to think it will be, or perhaps a few months. Nonetheless, by the time we get to June, July, August, the sun will be shining, this will have passed, and it's important that you're prepared for really what's going to happen then. So the first things I'd like you to possibly consider watching a little bit, you know, not super serious, is a couple of great films. So hopefully, or many of you might have seen The Martian, where Watney's left behind on Mars, and he's got to survive until the mission control can slingshot a spaceship back to pick him up, and he takes off and he gets rescued against all the odds. But during the time that he's on his own, I think 400 or 500 days on the film, he had to fend for himself, and he had to look after himself, and he had to survive. And I'll come on to that in terms of the things that it's important for you to be thinking about now. The second one, it's a little lighter than The Martian, which is called Aeronauts. I think it's on Amazon. And it's about a hot air balloon, and it goes up. And long story short, it's crashing to Earth. And when you're crashing to Earth, you need to jettison everything off your balloon to save the weight. So when you hit the Earth, you hit it at the lowest velocity, i.e. you don't die. So those couple of films, maybe, if you haven't watched them, I'm sure many of you will have done, you know, do watch those and look at how those people dealt with adversity, although they're, of course, Hollywood and film and stuff there, but nonetheless. So many years ago, and this is a true story, I was rung up by the head of astronaut relations at Virgin Galactic, a guy called Stephen Attenborough, and he asked me if I wanted to shave Richard Branson's beard off in space. This is back in 2006-07. So of course I said yes, and I paid my deposit, and then forever and ever and ever, Virgin Galactic never took off. And we're still waiting for it to go up into space and hopefully come back. But at the time, I developed an acronym when I was giving presentations to entrepreneurs and business owners, and it was called SPACE. And SPACE, they were letters, they sort of satisfaction and success, passion and persistence, attitude of action, confidence and common sense, and enjoy, enthusiasm, exceed, enjoy. So what I did the last couple of days, knowing that I'd give this talk, I've kind of repurposed that SPACE acronym into 5 different areas that we'll run through in the next 40 or so minutes. So the first one, S, is survive. Okay, you have to survive. Now, how you survive is entirely down to you. The decisions you make, the actions you take, what you intend to do and how you intend to do it, and how you get through it with the help and the support of co-workers, your friends, your family, people you're doing business with. But above all, it's a bit of a survival mode right now. And that's the same for us. You know, in terms of our business, we've been as threatened by many of you guys will be. We compete with massive multinational brands. For sure, they're elbowing their way into the distribution centers to try and make sure their stock's on the shelf. We're much smaller than them. Therefore, we have to be very active and very proactive about what we're doing and why, whether it's from the demand side to the consumer, or whether it's to the retailer side, liaisons with the buyers and the decision makers within the retailers we deal with, the Tesco's, the Sainsbury's, the Boots, for example. So survive. The second one is P, and I've just got that as plan, prepare, and I'll come on to pivot. And pivot's a tech term. It's when you've built something on the internet, you put it out there, it's not getting the sign up you expect. If you raise money, you're burning money, you're running out of money, you're not getting what's called a product market fit, i.e. people aren't interested in what you're trying to rep them. So you do what's called a pivot and you do something different. So the whole reason, for example, that Slack came about is that was actually a messaging platform that a games developer was using instead of email to allow its team to liaise all around the world. And the game didn't take off, but everybody loved this Slack app thing, this chat thing. And I'm sure many of you will use Slack or WhatsApp or now Microsoft Teams. And that business became a multi-billion-dollar business when the gaming business went bust. So the important thing to think about is whatever you're doing now, will it be fantastic out the other side of this storm that we're living through? Or will you, or do you think you're going to be pushing water uphill? I.e., is it going to be as hard as it was before going into coronavirus, that it will be coming out the other side? And you've got a number of weeks or short months to think about what your business does, why it does it, and how it's going to succeed. And I'll return to that right towards the end of the talk. So plan, prepare, pivot if you need to. You might not need to, let's hope. A, I've got here stands for action, but I split it into ACT-I-on, so act, I on. So whatever it is you decide to do, don't knee-jerk it. Don't think, oh, I've got to do something, it's never going to be any good, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. When you've sat down and decided what your future course of action is going to be, then you've got to act on it, and you've got to be decisive about it. Because right now, lots of people will be being very indecisive about what they do and why they do it. And they'll be worrying about short-term things, okay? And that's understandable, okay? We all live in the now. We're not necessarily programmed to think strategic out the other side. But if you're watching this broadcast and you're running a business, or you've started a business, or you're scaling a business, clearly you've got to think ahead. You've got to skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it's just been whacked, okay? Otherwise you'll miss out. So it's very important that you take the right action, but when you've decided what the right all right, it's really simple, and we'll come on to this right at the start of the points I'll talk to. It's cash, okay? If you don't have cash, you don't have optionality. I've got a successful hedge fund brother, Doug. He built his hedge fund up from a few $1 million to $2.5 billion, and he made some great decisions. And he would always talk to me about saying, "What's your cash? Well, what's your cash? It's a shareholder in King of Shares. Have you got enough cash? Have you got optionality?" So when we obviously went into coronavirus, we were all spending things on nice to haves and want to haves and the enjoyment side of life. And maybe now you're running out of cash, okay? So you need to take some very active decisions with regard to minimizing your cash burn. And that will and possibly can lead to some very hard decisions, typically involving staff. In the UK, we do have a furlough scheme where if you're a limited, the employee can come off the payroll, government picks up 80%, come back on the payroll. That's fantastic. There are other initiatives, not quite as generous as that, but nonetheless worthwhile investigating. Obviously, millions of businesses will be investigating those right now, but it's important at the right time you investigate them and you see what you can do, as well as minimizing your spends. Okay, you've got to cut your spends. You've got to cut your weight. Going back to the film Aeronauts, where the balloons plummet into the earth, they basically get everything off the. Sorry, this is my dad calling. Sorry about that. I've got an 87-year-old dad. I'm not too sure why he's calling. I'm sure he'll be okay. I'm sure he'll text me. So returning back to this, aeronauts, you've got to jettison everything, and that includes in the film, I won't spoil it for you, but basically they make it safely back to the earth, having got rid of all of the excess weight. Hopefully you can all still hear me still. Let me just check. Yeah, that's good. And then there's E, all right, which I still have as being enjoy, as difficult as it might be, this moment in time. Okay, it will never, hopefully, touch wood, have a moment in time like this ever again. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of tragedy in it, a lot of sadness in it, a lot of grief and upset and everything like that. But nonetheless, it's a super quiet time. It's an extraordinarily surreal time. Perhaps you can be able to recenter your thinking around you, your family, your friends, your loved ones, speaking to your parents, more like my dad's trying to get hold of me. And make sure you're staying in touch. So try and enjoy this moment in time, declutter where you can, embrace it, and also give thought to the sort of societal shift that's going to come out the other side. You know, the skies are blue, airlines aren't flying, the pollution's gone down. Hope animals, I saw some goats running around in a Welsh village taking over the town. It's some very unusual things that are going to happen coming out of the other side of this. And it's very important from your perspective that you're attuned and you're thinking about those things. So let's just run through, first of all, the 3 key subsets, and then some points in there and some points that will help you get to where you want to be. So the 3 sectors I've driven out are, first of all, right now you've got to manage your losses. You've got to minimize your losses. You've got to cut away every part of extraneous spend that your company or you as an individual have going, so you don't hit the ground and die. Okay, that's super critical. Okay, you've got to have cash. If you have a nice car, no petrol put in it, you can't drive the car. Okay, so it's really, really important that as hard as it might be, you've got to minimize your cash. Secondly, when you've gone through those, you've then got to look at gaining ground, how you're going to be relevant to customers, consumers, the world at large on the other side of all of this. Irrespective of what you do, you can always do it better. Okay, it's really important that you know that. As good as you think you are, there you can be. And that's an iterative process. Keep on striving to be the best, but never assume you are the best. And then finally, it's your psychology, how well you're treating yourself, your mental health, the mental health of your team. If you've had to lay people off, you're worrying about them, they'll be worrying about how they're going to survive in the future. That's super tough. And I'll come to that right at the end of the talk. So point number one, if you're making notes here, I see some there, pause the video, take the call. I spoke to Dad just before I went on the call, and I told him I'd call him at 4, and he's probably forgotten that. So I will be calling my dad back. He's gone out for a bike ride in Lowestoft, where he lives. So thank you very much for that. So point one, okay, point one, cash preservation. When I started King of Shaves, I've been made redundant. I went from 25 grand salary in a company car to nothing. I had a push bike. I had to rent out the flat that I bought a couple of years earlier because I couldn't afford to live there. I had no money. I had to do everything myself. Even when I founded the business, and it was in the depths of a recession in the UK with a 2 to 3 million unemployment rate, interest rates were substantial. I had no money then, even though I was a startup. So, for example, I had to hand fill 10,000 bottles of the shaving oil that we eventually got into Boots and to Harrods. So I'm sure there's probably lots of things that you spend money on without thinking about it, a coffee here, a delivery in there, a this or that or the other. Lots of little mounts up to lots of lots. So it's really key that you conserve your cash. You've got to have cash and optionality as you go through this hiatus that we're living through. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. Now, of course, it may well involve laying off staff. It may involve furloughing staff. It may involve perhaps taking people off from PAYE and perhaps they become contractors into you. There are many, many different ways of resolving this, but you've got to be really hard on yourself and look at the overcorrections that you need to make to keep you and your business alive. If your business isn't alive, it can't give employment to anybody and it can't supply products or services to anybody. So as hard as it might be, you need to take a very decisive decision to conserve your cash. And it's tough, okay? When I was at the conference production company, I was made redundant from before I founded King of Shaves. I joined as business development guy. I've risen up to managing director. When I joined, there were 42 members of staff. Over a period of 6 to 9 months, I ended up being the MD. I ended up having to make around about 10 people redundant, some of them in their 40s, some of them with kids at private school. And in the end, I had to make myself redundant and put the car keys to the company car, nice BMW 325i Sports, back to the letterbox of the company and walk away, went to the Legless Ladder pub and had some Guinnesses and looked at what I was going to do. Okay, so I went through that at 27 odd. I'm 54 now, and many of you will be young, some of you will be older, but nonetheless, it never gets any easier. Okay, it will never get tougher, but it's important that you take these tough decisions now, because it's important that you as an individual and your business, if you believe it has a future, it survives. Super important. You've got to then overcorrect, okay? You've got to almost do more than you think you need to do to right the ship. So this overcorrection business, there's a guy on Twitter, Prof. Galloway, who's a lecturer at New York State University. He's widely followed on Twitter and very smart guy. He, for example, predicted the collapse of WeWork 6 months ago. It seems like a lifetime. It seems like a lifetime ago. And his view is you've got to overcorrect, and then you bring it back on, and then you decide what you're going to do. But don't just sit there and gradually chamfer away a little bit of this, and a little bit of that. Be decisive about the decisions you know you'll need to take. When you then come to, you may well have to already have laid people off. So it's really important there that you as an individual are frank and honest with them about why you're having to do it, and that you care for them, and obviously the sadness in all of that. I read that Bird, a San Francisco scooter startup, laid its employees off on a Zoom call, which allegedly, although I'm not sure it's true, was pre-recorded, which is pretty shabby, really, because one moment it's like $1 billion unicorn, and the next thing it's busted. And these people who aren't the founders, they'll be working for wages and hopefully a future within the business. They're laid off en masse. And as a founder of a business with my name on the brand, King of Shades, I've always tried to be very frank and honest and open and upfront when I come to do things. And of course, I've had to lay people off in my time. Of course, I've had to fire people, not so much, luckily, and make people redundant very, very occasionally. But it's very important that you be true to you and treat others as you like to be treated yourself. You must keep now a will to win mindset, okay? You can't just have a survival mindset. At the start of the talk, I talked about space, survival. Of course, you've got to survive, but the mindset you adopt, it's got to be one of, I will get through this. I will take the decisions I need to. I won't do that. I will do this. I won't do that. I will do this. And be very true to yourself in doing that. If you don't, there's going to be really some issues that you'll need to face down the track, and you'll think, oh, why didn't I behave like that? You know, you've got to be in a marathon. If 26,000 odd people drop out or run the wrong way and you run the right way, you'll win the race. So it's almost the last person who keeps going, and super important that you keep this will to win in you. Okay, don't just hunker down, got to survive, do what it takes. Try and get yourself out of the other side. The situation is not going to last forever. Don't hire people, okay, yet. All right, there are some exceptions to the rule here, but right now, as tempting as it might be to take on another person, or do this or do that or do the other, especially if your business is kind of neither here nor there, you're not too sure, unless they're amazing value add people, you just do not want to be hiring people right yet. That's not to say that will be the case in a month or 6 weeks or 2 months, but you've got to really focus on the team you have, the opportunities you're chasing, decisions that you need to make. And you've got to, coming back to the money, you won't be able to, or it'll be very difficult for you to raise money right now. Okay, there are myriad reasons for this. I've seen a spreadsheet going around on the internet about VCs, private VCs, venture capitalist angels that are still investing. I don't believe that's true. I believe they say they are, and I believe they'll be backing their portfolio companies, but I cannot believe that they will be looking to invest right now, because they'll be looking at a reset going on in the industry, where one moment we have tons and tons of billion-dollar unicorn businesses or super exciting growth plans, and oh, if I raise 4 million, I can get to this, and 10 million, and I can get to that, or 250,000 pounds, and I can do this. I think they will all be thinking, we're going to wait and see to see what these companies look like out the other side, what decisions their founders have taken, whether they're still viable businesses in the business as unusual world that we're coming down to. You then need to take the pain yourself. Okay, if you're having to lay people off and you don't want to, clearly, if you're able to, you can take a cut in your own wages. Now, it's often difficult as a founder. You might be taking a minimum salary and perhaps living off the dividend payments of it, or you don't find yourself able to. But I just read, as I came online, that the founder of Monzo, the British challenger bank, Tom Blomfield, he's not taking a salary for the next year. He's giving a certain number of his 1,500 staff the opportunity to furlough. And hoping that if he seems to be taking the pain, not paying himself, that other employees will hopefully, if he needs to, reduce their wages and their income. They'll see that the example is being led by the boss. Okay, you've got to set the example you expect others to follow. And depending again on your business, you want to try and hang on to as much equity in it, especially if you're a scale-up business, not so much a lifestyle business, but a scale-up. You'll need more money, and typically people want shares for that. But if there are critical members of your team that you can't afford to pay, perhaps there is a way that you can vest them with stock over the coming months and perhaps the next 12 to 18 months that will motivate them to stay with you if they believe in the company, as opposed to earning money. But that depends on yours and their personal circumstances. When it comes to things like marketing, okay, and PR, literally just before this all kicked off, I was about to sign off on 3 pieces of marketing activity, 2 PR campaigns and a big market research piece into what the millennials and Zoomers think of shaving, as opposed to Gen Xers like me and boomers. So I think the combined output of that was about £60,000–£75,000. And I could have gone ahead and done it, but it would have been absolutely pointless doing it, because there is no way you would get any sort of cut through, especially from a PR piece right now, for a men's shaving brand, a gender neutral skincare brand. And even if you did market research for people out there, their minds wouldn't necessarily be on answering the questions without bias you want answered. So the marketing piece, as tough as that might be if there are marketing agencies on the call here, and I guess there will be, you've got to expect there's going to be a hiatus in company spend. Okay, it's just the way it is. It's viewed as discretionary, especially if the company is now in the reins of the CFO or the money man. They'll be looking at all of this and saying, now is not the time. Doesn't mean not forever, it just means not now. So back burner that where you can. And at the same time though, look at what others in your competitive set are doing. So I look at what our competitors are doing, for example, Gillette, for example, Bulldog, for example, Nivea, for example, Harry's, for example, Dollar Shave, what sort of comms they've got going on, how they're attempting to narrate their brand in a time people do not see advertising about you. They don't want to see about you and your brand. They just want to stay alive and be able to put food on the table. Okay, but there are ways you can get around that. Okay, it's really, really important. One of the things I saw very quickly in the UK, at least, is the NHS. We're fighting this battle. It's protect the NHS, stay at home, save lives. That's the narrative. Okay, so we've got key workers, we've got NHS workers. So if you go to our kingshaves.com website, if you're a key worker, you can enter. You've been paid by something like 70% of its retailers in there, which is astonishing. So don't assume that you've got to pay what you were going to pay. It's worth having a conversation, but just be sensible about it. And then you turning to sales, nothing in the world happens without a sale. Okay, a sale being made. My first job was selling advertising space over the phone. If I didn't speak to 200 people a day on my phone with a cable attached to it and spoke to 10 decision makers, closed 2 deals, I wouldn't get any sales in. Therefore, Marketing Magazine, the company I worked for in the mid to late 80s when I left uni, it wouldn't have had any revenue. So you've got to give thought to your sales channels. And also, if you're using third-party sales channels, look at the vulnerability and the threat of those. In the UK, for example, Amazon is not taking any non-essential products into its DCs, into its warehouses. That's an absolute nightmare. If you're selling products, for example, whatever might be deemed non-essential, Amazon aren't taking them into the DC, so there's no way you're getting them out to your customers. So you've got to kind of own, if you can, your own supply and demand chain. Very difficult. If you're supplying retailers like we do, it's a constant battle to get products in. And if you're supplying third parties, you've got to be very mindful that they're in charge of that channel, not you. So have that down as a threat in the future. And then finally, just look at your general infrastructure costs. You know, what you're paying for and why you're paying for them. And you'd be surprised. I run an accounting package called Zero, or the company does. There's a massive long tail of lots of littles in our nominals. I just wonder, oh, what's that? Or what's that? Or what's that? And they all mount up to like 50, £100,000, yeah? I mean, you might think, oh, I'm paying £100 a month for this service, and over a year it's 1,000, 1,200. 10 of those, that's quite a lot, yeah? That's 12 grand. So every little helps. So do a little deep dive into what you're spending on and why. So that's the start then of the you manage your losses piece. So now let's come on to gaining ground. All right, this is really important because you have a moment in time when you can position yourself for the future, not for the present. This is all about skating to where the hockey puck's going to be, not where it currently is. Start of March, we're all at restaurants, we're all having a lovely time, life's okay, maybe we're thinking about holidays in the summer, and then boom, within literally a week, we're on lockdown in lockdown London, on almost the world. And the world dynamic is substantively shifting. And it's important that whilst this is happening, you look to gain ground. You've got to position yourself and your company for the future. You've got to look at, for example, supply and demand imbalances. So on BBC last night, there was on Panorama about a sportswear manufacturer in Northern Ireland making sports kit. It's coming to the sporting season. Euro's coming along, Olympics is coming along. Now they're not. Oh my God, what do we make? Right. So at the same time, we've got personal protection equipment, PPE for NHS and key workers. Apparently the government's not ordered any of it, or it's been very lazy or slack or slow, whatever, in ordering it in. So within a matter of days, this sporting manufacturer in Northern Ireland had repurposed its entire manufacturing chain into sewing together blue protective equipment against a massive order, I think, for the NHS. And it's managed to keep, as far as I understand it, all of its workers in employ. So it's not making sports kit for football teams and rugby teams and cricket teams. It's making essential equipment for the NHS. And I'm sure in the future, when they come to look the other side of this, they'll also be able to say we supported our frontline workers at this very difficult time, and perhaps use it as part of their marketing and engagement strategy with future consumers. I very much doubt Nike and Adidas have been able to do something like that. Perhaps they have, but this company, it's helped save their lives. Similarly, there's a company in London called Woods Food Services. They supply wholesale into big wholesalers like Booker's. So Booker's aren't supplying, aren't buying, they're not going through to the stores, so their business has crashed, but they've now repurposed to be offering in London home deliveries. Right now, their website, you have to ring up, which is a huge opportunity for somebody to build them a demand-side platform where people can log on and order and it can be delivered. Probably take a week, 2 weeks for that to be coded. But right now, they've had to resort to taking phone calls in, putting vans together, sending them out with wholesale priced fruit and veg. And I tell you, in my local Tesco, it's not had eggs in there for a week now. So that would be a really good way of getting business in. And they will then own their own supply and demand channel in doing that. Woods Food Services. A couple of examples there. So then you've got to then look at future behavioral changes. Okay, life is going through a hiatus and it will come back to a new normal. But a lot of dynamics that were right, just a month ago will be equally as right going forward, but other things will have changed. So one of the things, for example, that we've been working on at King of Shades for about 2 years now is taking our packaging from plastic tubes, which are 79% going to 70% going to landfill, into lifetime use refillable pump action, which are just starting to sell in the UK now and then internationally. Now, that was a commitment we made to reduce plastic, of which 70% gets landfilled. All right, you think it's going to get recycled, it kind of doesn't. We didn't want to be killing dolphins with it, so we repurposed our packaging, and that's a 3-year plan, plastic-free by 2023. Now, that imperative that we set off with 2 years ago in 2018, it's equally as valid now. It's equally as valid. So we've got to double down on making sure when we come out of the hiatus we're in, that people still understand that, and we've stuck to our guns. We haven't defaulted back to cheap plastic. that we've stuck to what we said our brand's mission, value, purpose was going to be. So that positioning and looking for future behavioral changes, there's going to be a lot coming out of this. You know, offices, that's going to be interesting. How people purchase, that's going to be interesting. How they travel, what they think about, what's important to them as individuals. Clearly, personal hygiene, wash your hands, stay at home, wash your hands, save lives. So that's going to be probably a huge, huge opportunity for companies that can, if they're in the business similar to me in toiletries, perhaps you might address that as a future opportunity. Going back to King of Shaves 10, 12 years ago, we saw beards come along. Jonathan, who's hosting this webinar, has a beard. We thought, oh, beards, we're called King of Shaves. We owned King of Beards as a trademark. We didn't really get behind it. Beards is now massive, and there's probably tons of blokes growing beards at home now because they can't be bothered to shave. But we need to keep shaving relevant. But that opportunity I kind of missed. One of my misses. We do beard stuff at King of Shaves, King of Beards, but it's not the core competency of our business. But there'll be lots and lots of opportunities for you to look at by absolutely seeing what's happening in the world now and how you can take advantage and make the most of those. You'll also need to be fast. Coming out the other side, everybody will be really working fast to try and rebuild their P&L and their balance sheet. And you'll need to be fast as well. And whatever you'll need to do, will need to be better. Okay, it's always been the same. You can't just set up a business. As many people think they can. I will do this. I want a career as entrepreneur. I can do this. I can do that. Unless it's demonstrably better, or it has a need to be purchased or bought, or it's wanted or desired, there's no reason why anybody will shop you. So whatever it is, it almost needs to be painkiller, not a sort of a vitamin or a plaster. It needs to deal with the problem and come up with the solution. Where you can, again, when you're gaining ground, can you change your fixed cost base to a variable cost base? So perhaps things that you had paid for internally, you can outsource those. We're extraordinarily virtual now at King of Shaves. Everything is off in the cloud. No idea where it's all hosted, but it's probably Amazon Web Service or it's Azure, Microsoft Azure Cloud. There is nothing. We don't have any paper. We do everything digitally. All of the invoicing and all of the liaison with all of the retailers and all of the payroll, for example, on Charlie HR. All of that is extraordinarily cost-effectively technology-driven. And I basically run the company off my iPhone with a variety of apps there, and then using technology like WhatsApp and Slack and this and that and the other to stay in touch with people. So look at the infrastructure costs of your office. Do you need it? Do you need that photocopier? That probably don't exist anymore, showing my age there. Do you need that franking machine? Do you need to have 2 laser printers? Do you need this? Do you need that? You know, even when you look at the broadcast now on network TV, BBC is serving broadcast which is shot on iPhone or shot on Samsung Galaxy. So it's more the content now, not necessarily the production values or the expense of that. So use technology, super important to embrace that. You know, I'm a big fan of Zero. I know Gary Turner, the MD of that scaled from nothing to be a substantial business. I run my private limited on it. King of Shaves runs on it. It's an astonishing piece of kit. And if you're not using it, look at that or other similar platforms out there, for example, QuickBooks. Make your sales operation the focus. I've talked about sales before. Nothing starts without a sale, okay? You've got to, as tough as it might be, try and get or engender interest in your business and why you're doing it. And towards the second point I'll come on to, it's really important now. Lots of people now, they know you repping product, they know you're selling product, they know that you're the best, whatever it is that you're doing, but they almost want to know why. What's your why? Okay, why should I choose or buy you? Why? So when I founded King of Shaves, the only other competitor that we had, we had 2 actually, was Gillette, which was like the behemoth in the room that everybody shaved with, and there was lack of awareness. Those were our two competitors in the early 90s. There was no Nivea for men. There was no L'Oreal Men Expert. There were no gazillions of little boutique men's grooming brands. Men's grooming didn't exist at that time, not in the way that we defined it to be. So we were a challenger brand in that space. We bought shave.com for £18. 10, 15 years later, you saw D2C happen, direct to consumer. Dollar Shave Club famously, Harry's famously, Glossier famously, lots and lots of very loss-making, very capital-intensive VC-backed businesses. But when we started, we kind of had a 10, 12-year runway of just Gillette to give a kick into, which was, you know, astonishing when I look back on it now. Very difficult that that's going to happen. But I was always out there selling, okay? Always be closing is a mantra. Keep it simple, stupid. And then there's a lot of sales mantra, DIPIDA: define, identify, prove, acquire, desire, action. You can Google those terms. They're really worthwhile learning. All the years on, they're still top of mind, as I hope that you can see. And remember, a no is just a not now. It's not a no forever. It takes time to build sales relationships with people and open up new opportunities. A no is a not now, not the right time, not quite yet, not then. And if you say, if not now, then when? The person might say, well, if you give me 4 or 5 weeks, get back in touch and make sure that you do and follow up on the call. And then just to finish off there, it's then about your culture. Super important, all right? It's super important now what your MVP is, your mission, value, purpose. Lots of businesses are now B corporations. Lots of them are laying out their stall to be as minimally damaging to the environment as possible, or to have certain workers' rights, or to commit their carbon consumption, or X or Y or Z. So when it comes to your MVP, your mission, value, purpose, be very clear what your purpose is and why you're doing it, and why a consumer or a customer will engage with you. Yes, profit's important if you're in business, okay? Profit pays for bills, pays mortgages, pays salaries, pays investment. You can't be a not-for-profit in business. It's very awkward to be that. But be very clear what your purpose is and why you're doing it. I showed you with King of Shaves, we're transitioning from plastic packaging, very cheap, to lifetime use refillable platform, aluminium. And then separately, we've got a new company, Integro, which is developing a Code Zero lifetime use refillable packaging platform, which will be launching next year. So those sort of beliefs, the MVPs of those businesses, are very, very front and central to its success. So finally, sorry, it's been quite, I don't know, download, but kind of it is what it is the psychology, okay? It's your mental health, the mental health of those who work with you. Are you looking after yourself? If you're not looking after yourself, and it's like you're not looking after other people, or maybe you're looking after people more than you're looking after yourself. It's super important that you look after you, okay? Yes, we need to transition from a me to a we and an us culture, but you're no good if you're not looking after yourself. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're definitely not doing your employees any favors. They may well be worrying about you and what the outcome's going to be. And it's important that when it comes to your employees, you're very empathetic with them. You acknowledge their concern, and you're transparent with their worry, and you involve people in a solution if you need to get people to get behind you, to get your company through this astonishingly difficult time. But you've got to look after yourself, okay? Imagine what your mum or dad would say. Are you looking after yourself? It's probably why my dad was calling earlier. Are you taking any care of yourself, Will? And I'm thinking, yeah, Dad, I hope you're taking care of you and Mum. So super important. Also, try and keep your team bonded, okay? I've now been working from home for the last couple of weeks. I often work from home, to be honest with you. I don't go into our corporate offices every day. I don't need to. I've got a great team there. Running it, and often I'm quite disruptive when I go in anyway, and the workflow crashes and I annoy them and then I leave. But we're now very distributed, and we're in a very unusual personal environment. for example, you can see what my home looks like behind here, but we're very distant from each other. So it's important that you keep the comms up and the chat, and you keep your team involved and bonded around what you're attempting to do. If you're able to, also do spontaneous random acts. Okay, I often try and do these. I'm a bit notorious now. On a Friday or a Thursday, I'll turn up at King of Shaves and with a few bottles of gin or spiced rum or some whiskey and give it to the guys, and here we are, get you through the weekend. And that was in advance of coronavirus. And I've always, I guess, when you're a founder, you're able to be spontaneous and do kind of what you want to do within reason, to keep people motivated. And that's very important now. And also unexpected, spontaneous, random acts of kindness, very important right now. And people will always remember those. So just have that in mind when you're dealing with people, whether they're suppliers that are, challenging to deal with, and maybe you can give them a little something to keep them happy. Right now everybody's worried about themselves and their lives. Also try and adapt your culture to these whole crazy quarantined at home hours. Okay, the culture piece, what you're doing, don't change it if it was great before. If it wasn't so great before and is a little bit difficult, perhaps you've now got an opportunity to rebase, refocus and reset the culture of your business to make sure it delivers on your desires. Be honest with yourself and the team. And I'm coming to the end of this now. Hopefully I've not talked on too long. But over the past 10 years, I've seen and mentored and advised and talked to and seen hundreds of companies that have started up between the last financial crash and now. And lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of them, I know in my heart of hearts, they're never going to go anywhere. All right? Their business, whether it's a lifestyle business or a scale business, as much as I want them to succeed and the advice I give them and how they're going to do it and what they do and how and this and that and the other, I feel even then they were pushing water uphill. They're assuming that life's going to get better. People who come in, perhaps, I'm a fool for starting this, but there'll be a greater fool who's going to come in and help me get it somewhere. And we've now had a short, sharp shock, which is going to stop a lot of those companies in their tracks. And hopefully it won't be one of your companies. I really hope so. Hope not. But there is likely to be very little, if no funding for the foreseeable future. The lovely boutique idea that you might have had, or the consultancy this, or the product service that there were lots of competitors too, it's very unlikely that those are going to succeed. What will zag out at the other side will be, if you look deep and hard at what you're doing and why you were doing what you were doing and what you're going to do in the future, perhaps there will be, and I hope there is, a future for your business. But if it was tough for you before coronavirus came along, it's going to be impossibly tough after. Okay, and there's no issue in well, let's say failure. Goodness me, I've had to close down other companies. I've failed at stuff. I launched razors. They didn't get the traction, even though we sold tens of millions of them. We couldn't break the Gillette stranglehold. All right, that was a failure piece, albeit in a different time. Nonetheless, we had to step back, having lost lots of money, and refocus the business. So please please be honest with yourself, what your business is doing and why, and don't be afraid to change it as an individual to do something which will have a future, because it's important that you have a future, of course. And then finally, celebrate small wins. Okay, even on this call, it's great that many of you have called in from all around the world. I know I've got calls from Australia, from America, from the UK, people I've known and chatted to outside of this call, as well as new, hopefully, friends and people and business owners who are taking advantage of opportunities like this to hear me talk about what I would do. But the little wins in this is, I hope there's been a little win for you today, dialing in to this call. I hope at least some of the things I talked about resonate with you, or will help you take the necessary actions that you need to do in this time of crisis. Okay, it is a global crisis, it is a big thing, but plan, prepare to act, and break out the other side. That's the most important. Is that okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Will. So you might hear my little toddler in the background. The realities of home working during all this. But that was really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Will, and some great advice in there. We've had plenty of questions through the Q&A. So if I may, I'll actually start with one from me. And you were talking particularly at the start about the importance of cash and the spending on the kind of nice to haves. And this is a question that I actually asked Lucy Cohen in our first webinar last week. Do you think that when we come out of the other side of this, that we'll see more businesses be a bit more conservative with their finances and taking fewer risks?
Yeah, I mean, look, without a doubt. Okay, so I talk about what's called a Starbucks generation. Okay, when I founded King of Shades, you went to a Costco, you bought a big tin of coffee, you had the cups. Your tin of coffee cost 10 quid or 9 quid. Can you hear me okay? Hopefully you can. And it would last for 6 months. Now you can go out and spend £3.50 on a Starbucks latte, extra mocha, this, that, or the other. And lots of people will. Okay, that's just the personal consumption piece. Within the company itself, everybody will be looking at what they're spending and why, because everybody will have been scared shitless, and still probably are, about what's going to happen in the future. So there will be a moment of, I'm sure, belt tightening, and people, even if it's not you, the finance director, the finance manager, the guy who authorizes the spends in the business, they'll be looking at, do we need to spend this? Can we get away with not spending it? My colleague Andy, who's worked with me 23 odd years at King of Shades, he's extraordinarily thrifty guy. All right, I'm a bit more spendy. I mean, that's kind of maybe what differentiates him and I. But he is absolutely nails in terms of killing costs down, and often overrules some of the spend decisions I would like to make. But right now, companies will massively be changing their behaviour post this, without a doubt.
Okay, excellent. So the first question from the attendees comes from Mac, who says that you will talk about the analogy at the start with the balloon and shedding weight to make sure you don't crash to earth. Looking at this scenario, and we don't really know how long it's going to last, how bad it's going to get, how difficult is it to know just how much weight to shed?
Look, I think you've got to shed as much weight as you can, okay? Clearly, we don't know how long this is going to last. If you're living in the land of Donald Trump, it's all over by allegedly the end of April. Cannot see it myself, okay? There's so much domino effects going on around the world. For example, in China, factories are ready to supply all over again, all right? But there's no demand side out of Western economies. That's a big issue for China. There's lots and lots of things that are going to happen that's going to make this curve be longer than you expect it to be. So without damaging your business, imagine if you're a bit overweight, you've not been going down the gym, you've not been keeping fit, you've been nomming a few burgers or a few deliveries too many. You need to shed, the right amount of body weight, mixture of really fat, but not so much that you become skeletal and you can't survive. So it's a balance thing, but you've got to, I think, assume, I hate the word assume, shouldn't use it, but you've got to look at, it's going to last longer than you think it is. So you'll make decisions that are tougher than you think they are, because if you can then what's called manage expectations, under promise, over deliver, wouldn't it be great to cut away a load of cost, realize the business is steady run rate and you're kind of okay. Having cut away that cost, when you come out the other side, you start making more profit because your overheads are lower. Everybody's happy with that. But absolutely, there's going to be a very, very big difference in how companies behave with regards to expenditures.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so I'll be able to get through probably two. This one is actually anonymous, so whoever it is, thank you for the question. They ask, do you think that one positive effect that will be the UK businesses improve digitally due to the restrictions on, obviously, face-to-face business?
I think the way in the UK, the way the UK can communicates, and the outbreaks and the opportunities in business in remote learning, and the fact that you now have BBC, ITV, Channel 4, all broadcasting from people's homes, arguably there's a much more personality to those broadcasts than there would be in a set TV studio. Now, before, broadcasters would say, oh, it's got to be shot in 4K, it's got to be shot down a super fiber optic line. No, now lots of content's being served by individuals. It's about the quality of the content. The Joe Wicks is doing the home fitness from home. So whatever business that you're going to be in, obviously we're on Zoom on this, which is a very valuable business now, but nonetheless, it's a comms platform. If you can work with the new business as unusual, where there may very well be a distributed workforce which wants to work from home. I'll come back to this as well. A lot of younger people don't want to work from home, yeah? Because where they live, it's not that great. It's a room and it's inexpensive. They haven't got a lovely garden. They haven't got a beautiful house to wander around with a garden to enjoy. Actually, loads of people enjoy going into work. So there's going to be a reset around who wants to work from home, who can work from home, who has to go into work. And comms and the behavior of the digital service providers, the newcos, the new companies, will, the coronial companies, as they're likely to be called, something like that, they will reflect a new way of working. So you've got to take a lot of data in from all of the things that you're seeing and decide what you're going to do and why. But there will be huge myriad opportunities for those type of companies, absolutely. But you've got to get ahead of the curve with what it is you intend to sell as a product or a service.
Okay, brilliant. And we've probably got time for one question, which comes from Shazia, and I'll actually adapt it. So Shazia asked, how are you finding working from home? But initially you work from home regularly. So I'll adapt it slightly to how are you working from home full time, and how are your team adapting?
So I've always, coming up to my sailing earlier, I was a single-handed sailing guy. So I've always quite liked my own company, and I'm sort of doing what I'm doing where I'm doing it. Even where we're at King of Shades, it's very quiet in our office. It's kind of library. It's just quite quiet. People keep themselves. I basically work from wherever my phone is. So I travel a lot. I happen to be at home right now. I try to work from home. It can get quite intense being at home all of the time, but I'm always, wherever I am, taking in content from other sources to try and adapt what I'm doing. So I like it being at home. It can feel a bit claustrophobic. It's nice and sunny today. It's not too grey and outside. However, lots of people do not like working on their own from home. Okay, humans are very social creatures. They don't necessarily work well in an isolation position. So it's a mixture of then the comms and the balance. So I'll go into King of Shades anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week, maybe 1 time a week, go in, annoy them, crash their productivity. They'll all tell me to bugger off. And then I'll just WhatsApp them or teamwork them on an app we have, or comms them like we're doing on Zoom. But it's very much you as an individual. You're only going to get the best out of you if the work environment you're in is getting the best out of you. Just happens for me. I quite like it. I can go and do what I want to do, but I'm also founder of a business, and I've been able to do what I want to do the past 27 odd years.
Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, that's all we've got time for. So, Will, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us today. If you had a question for Will that we haven't had time to answer, I know Will is very active on social media, on Twitter, and you can find him at I am Will King.
I am William King.
I am William King.
Yeah, there's a guy, I am Will King in America. He gets really annoyed. So yeah, I am William King.
Bit like the John Lewis in the
exactly.
States. But if there's anything that you wanted to catch up on with today's webinar, then we'll be sending out the recording in the coming days. And we've got another webinar this Friday. That's the 3rd of April. The next one in the Business COVID-19 series, and that's with Daniel Priestley, serial entrepreneur and well-respected author, and he'll be talking about why a recession can lead to reinvention. So we hope to see you there. But for now, thanks for joining us today, and bye.